Hello and welcome back. I am going to talk about the Carolina Bays again because I watched my Carolina Bays episode and thought, okay, it's been a while. I certainly have updated information. So here we go. Okay, so Carolina Bays are these things that are found pretty much everywhere along this region, relatively speaking, more so over here. So, like, this map here shows a lot of them up here, and notably they seem to have a focal point near Michigan, in Michigan, and also in Wisconsin. This map here shows it in Wisconsin as well as like a focal point, which has been associated with being impact basins, but we've talked about how it's actually spiral basins where the eddies were forming of currents of overlying water that was flowing in eddies, and then it came down this way and interacted with this whole region, and that's how the Carolina Bays were formed over here, interacted with this region. So I guess they're down here, interacted with the current coming out this way, and just formed here. So it probably requires a heat source nearby that is like maybe even melting some kind of nucleus that the current forms around that like rests in positions, but I don't know if that's true. Just a thought that that's coming to mind of something more glaciated, like just moving boulders but of ice in the currents because it's just enough water to move even large chunks of ice, but they get shaped and put and dropped like eggs maybe that then shape the terrain around them. It's worth noting there are many abnormal ones, like this one is relatively normal looking. Not so much, not so much, not so much. And like if we look at Carolina Bays map, like this is what people are talking about, these ones. And it really kind of like separates things that are forming in the same process and should be also considered as part of the process, overall process that's behind the Carolina Bays. See this one, these here, like these are the nice ones. These are nice ones, but even this one has this weird feature that doesn't quite fit. And there's other ones. So if we go out and zoom out, down here, interestingly, this whole shape is kind of like one and even has this elongated region like there. But if we look around like this, also elongated, also elongated. Even maybe like an arrow, honestly. This one looks a lot like an arrowhead. So they're not all perfectly formed. This one also looks like an arrowhead. This one also has relatively a sharper point over here. Sharper point. So there's like a tendency in this area near this thing that has this point to have other systems that have points around them. Point. Wow, that's incredible. Oh my god, that's literally that's an arrow. Okay. Here's one. Pretty more normal shaped for the Carolina Bay shape. But let's see. I wonder then if like these are Carolina Bay shapes. Don't see them as prolific, if at all, over here. I'm sure they're here, just I don't know where they are. Except generally. This spot is just really, really prolific here. Basically starting as we approach this region. I guess they're pretty much constant. Like that. Is not quite the shape. Not quite the shape. It's way more up along and like different dimensions, like this one. Okay, so okay, so I noticed like if we zoom out, there's generally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these like offshoots from this path that just go towards the coastline here, exits here, exits here, and then this one, interesting. This one goes this way, and then starts to wobble, and then goes this way, but also goes this way. Maybe across here, down here, down here, also across here towards basically this line down Florida that continues and wraps even here, continues here, and then maybe wraps around this way. So there's that going on. There's the Wisconsin Center around the driftless zone going on. Driftless area. But then if we zoom in here, so zooming out, we see these, maybe one here too, kind of parallel-ish, depending on, basically angled away from the Appalachians. So like that way, that way, that way. But as we get down here, bending more to like straight down, and then maybe even over this way even. So definitely related to that, there's a huge mound here that's just like pushing the water away from it down towards the lower elevation into the oceans, especially once they open and the region opens enough. And then the presence of this magma flow over here must have interacted enough to like start to melt things more so than it was otherwise. If there's glacier aspects to it, or at least maybe not melt, but influence the water in a way that it wasn't happening without the heat exchange. In a similar way to over here, how there's maybe some heat exchange, like going like this way across here, through here. So like the Carolina Bays in Nebraska, it looks like, are down here more so. Which is over in this region, like at the base of this current, where maybe it's low enough terrain that the water is cutting into softer sediment type terrain than like hard, dense material that stands tall and has sharp, jagged peaks. relatively speaking. All the Appalachians have been eroded down, but just in general, like mountains are going to be more up down and just like singular structures of material all bound. Whereas over here, it's going to be more loosely bound, and then like, for instance, here it's going to be just the sand is just going to be sand that's not bound at all and just in a pile. So there's piles of like unbounded material like sand, but then over here there's a loosely bounded material like sediment, and then there's densely bounded or tightly bounded material like rock of mountains, like mountains that produce different degrees of circumstances. So in the circumstance of the intermediary where it binds, but it's not so bound as to be uninfluenceable by the currents, like it essentially is more able, like even the Appalachians could have the same thing happen with enough current, but it just takes more, and it didn't happen because it's happening elsewhere. So basically it goes to the places like lower terrain, and then heat exchange is happening. And I guess pointing back to focal points of here and here, because of some reason that I'm not quite sure, it makes me think of the episode I did recently. Spray and something about spray, maybe. Your videos, I don't think it was called Spray and Pray because I already called it that, but maybe Under Pressure. I already used Spray and Pray, so Under Pressure. This one, basically the idea is that there's a overlying current that's spiraling like this, and then below that, at depth on the surface of the ammonite, is another current that's flowing just out at the bases of the ridges of the ammonite, like let's say shallogram. Like through the channels, and not actually being influenced as much as the overlying current that's like holding down and pushing with enough pressure that it sprays outward, but it does so with such a like continuous process and with enough force that it actually begins to shape and mold the material depending on the material. Like it's not sand and unbounded, or unless it has like heat applied in other circumstances, but just like water, some kind of mineral to bind, something to bind it. Without a binder, something to bind the thing, it stays kind of loosely packed. So it, like in instances like here, we have an ammonite because it's a large structure, but it's still like not really visible from like the ground. Like if we go over here and look around, we're not gonna be like, wow, we're in the midst of an ammonite. Wow, do you see that ammonite? As far as the eye can see an ammonite. We're just gonna be like, oh. But we're in the midst of the ammonite. Okay, speaking of, I've been talking about how this is an ammonite, and then over here is an ammonite, but I didn't really. I keep looking at it like, where is this ammonite? Looking at it like this, and then I'm like, okay, this is a good thing because dendrites are a common feature in ammonites, where they got a side that has like dendrites. And then I'm like, well, what about Greenland? Maybe it's like the last lobe thing, and that's when it clicked. Where Greenland is kind of the end of the spiral outward that then goes around here, down this way, and then follows that inlet, and then down across this way, where pretty much material was shoved over this way. So the boundary was intruded upon here, but it generally went just straight down, presumably in the ammonite shape this way. and then across like this way and through here and out this way. But then this ended up producing other spirals that influenced the boundary and maybe pushed it more back this way. So then the current went more across here and out this way and ended up swirling this way instead in an eddy against the resistance. So because it's swirling here inward, counterclockwise inward from Greenland to the Rockies around to the Hudson Bay center. Because it's doing that with the Rockies or the Appalachians there, it's producing some offshoot ammonites over here, probably because of other circumstances like Yellowstone counter to it. Some kind of energetic balance that also is happening. But, yeah, so there's an ammonite here. I feel much more confident that that's probably the shape of it there. And maybe even Iceland is kind of like Hawaii in a sense, how it came out of this ammonite shape and was emitted in some way where it's related to the presence of this system as like inducing enough current over here basically to induce eddies that upwell that then produce Iceland. Oh my god. 60 million started right after the KT boundary. I think I've read 1 million kind of time frame, I thought, but it doesn't matter. I'm just kind of curious. So like this then spirals this way and in and around. This kind of reminds me of Hawaii here. The one that spirals off of here goes around here, and then another one that spirals off of here that goes much larger and goes basically up to here and around, and down here and across. Where it's got this thing that then atop it, much the same as over here. It's got this spiral with this thing atop it that spirals out, and then it opened. I don't know what to make of that exactly in terms of ammonite aspects, that it had this like gap open between. Oh, this looks like this looks kind of like what happened over here. This thing coming out, the snake head, the eye, kind of reminiscent of it. So it's like an arm, in a way, coming off of Nidhogg's eyeball. Right opposite to probably closely tied to Atlantis, all the aspects of what's going on over here too. So with that in mind, we see this very straight here. It's so odd there's no like evidence of it in here. This straight thing. Boop. It must have gone this way and then this way. ran into resistance and went out that way. I just carved this jet stream. Also going this way, but then this way through here. Not sure if that's the right word. I think I'm looking for bathymetry. Bathymetry. Oh, it's got a snake head inside it. So that's like a nucleus. If the snake head, if we base off of over here, where the snake head here has a snake head here, it's like the nucleus here. So like there's an inner and outer one, so that this inner one is at the nucleus of this overall eddy that was forming here that I talk about in Eye to Eye and Snake Eyes and other places recently. But it is very reminiscent of how this is happening around like a section. So this current's coming in this way, so the eyes are on the towards the east, where over here it's toward the eye, like the top of the head is this side, presumably towards the west, maybe even that like darker blue representing an eye. And then what's like within the mouth is this little nucleus thing, it seems. And maybe with some relationship back there, I'm not sure. And they don't all show that kind of a feature. I wonder, whoa, what the? Imaging pock marks and ring-like features in Hudson Bay. Northwest to southeast. Northwest to southeast, going this way. Where's that thing I just saw? I wonder, northwest to southeast. You know, this right here, it looks detectable here. Maybe even there. Like the current, like there was a current. Maybe it did go this way. It went through here, went through across this way, so it probably did go this way. And then maybe it wanted to go out this way, but Greenland was in the way for a time being, so it ended up like physically ramping resistance to go across, maybe. Like physically ramping all of this, so the pressure that was channeling through here was actually pushed up into the higher waters that were flooding the region overall, and so it ramped this without etching it, maybe. And got in, and then basically what goes up must come down kind of thing. To a degree. I mean, maybe comes down a real long time in the future. I don't know. It goes up, but it goes up, or it goes down. It stays down over here. It's down, and then it goes up, goes across here, but then it ramps up, and then starts doing like a thing like this, maybe, where it goes over this. Through here, and then over here, down through here, etching here, over this, and then it starts to get into here, but then maybe even influences over here. Like, I feel like it points at these to a degree where maybe it's got some relationship. Especially the Wisconsin one, maybe. Looks like it points at it. If we go like this, measure from here to this one. Like it's pretty... I don't know why it makes me... It's pretty straight through there. It misses that a bit, but globe is rounded and not exactly the same as it was. It goes to there, more so than if I go over here. Like it's not quite as on as that one is. I think honestly, if I zoom in and put it to like this corner, right there, it's pretty spot on there, a little off there. So maybe it has some wobble out to the sides too, like a round. A wobble to it that maybe goes in here. And maybe wobbles out this way, across here, and just etches here. Out through here, out through here, out through here. And then building up back pressure, then it starts to make it go more sideways through the sides. This is real interesting looking. This whole area is kind of incredible looking. Does look like there's some kind of current going this way then, across here. And then just seemingly turning at resistance. Almost like it's near the boundary of the ammonite. Like the boundary was actually more like even here maybe, right here. It doesn't really flow into that region, this whole section though. So I was thinking, portal, that if we look over here, we've got this eddy, and then we've got this like backstop kind of thing that's forming to basically produce a boundary for this current flowing in to not get in as easily. It just like builds a wall because it's not getting in. If it's overwhelming, it'll just break the wall down. But if it's not getting in, it'll build a wall and build a structure like this. That's kind of like a backstop to the rotation and so that it just can become more defined, and as is all of the walls around it, pretty much. So maybe there's similar things going on, and this also has triple junction over here, which is formed in a spiral just like this off of the side. So maybe in a similar way up here is producing a backstop. I was thinking maybe Greenland, but if it's like Greenland's more maybe like this segment reflective of like the end of the ammonite, maybe here even some segment of the spiral at the end of the spiral, maybe here. Something that's still part of this overall region by being major, significantly tied to the identical process. Like there's not, this eddy is not global, it's local, and it influences more so the region it's in, including perhaps a region out here that's like Greenland relative to this eddy, where my thought is instead of it being Greenland that's the backstop, it's actually this thing, the North Pole region. Because Greenland is kind of lacking over here in the support structure, so it looks more dendritic. It looks more like currents went through it than like this, where this looks like a backstop formed to basically support the eddy where it is up against this terminal to produce this this terminal of the North Pole, and also an eddy here. That part of it basically went like this, I guess, and around at some point, went around and formed another eddy here and another eddy here. Up, down, back over. Also out this way. So this one's going counterclockwise, I guess. I feel much more confident saying this is going counterclockwise. Also interesting, this Greenland kind of resembles this. So like if this structure were to be growing from like a nucleus that generally started around here and then grew out in a counterclockwise way where it started to produce little segments that are like Greenland, but then over time it broke it apart by currents passing through it, like here. Like currents are passing through were passing through Greenland enough to like create less support structure. It just didn't actually etch it enough to look more like this, although maybe under the glaciers there's a degree of like apparentness of a more like this throughout it. I don't know. But it looks like this one was like the past Greenland, kind of like when we look at Australia. How it had an eye over here, the Eye of Odin, and another eye here, but like this one is no longer, and this one is, and there are probably many of them generally going out this way, and then it produced like a backstop here to hold it in place. Maybe this backstop even. Some kind of structure to hold it, where this then kept going outward, and maybe even was forming another one here, where like if we look at Australia, we really just see these two, and then this one is more subtle. It's looking more like a snake head than an eyeball. These are more like eyeballs. This has more of like an eye and a mouth and a tongue and upper and bottom lip with some teeth type of appearance. But so if this was like a different chunk, like a different maybe neutron that produces, or neutrons that produce backstops for the current to be held within, that then behaves as an overall container for the current, that then is basically an atom on different fractal scales, and that's how they behave, kind of thing. Then it looks like it reveals something important, that this mirrors it, breaks off, extends outward, maybe fills in to a degree in some way, if it kept going, or but so if it made a Greenland here, maybe it made a Greenland here, and then maybe it made a Greenland like similarly with a backs like this side, but over here, I mean, these are kind of face to face, so it doesn't quite fit, but maybe in terms of this flat face and this flat face versus the rounded and pointy faces. But I'm thinking maybe that ties to these things that are in here. that look kind of like islands that were etched out of something more like this. And then the surroundings just are stable enough, high enough elevation wise. This strongly suggests a current path. There's a current coming out of here, going across down this way, current coming out of here, going across down this way, maybe interacting. Flowing in? Maybe flowing in. Maybe those are inlet channels, not like it's not a spray. It's such a sucking energy that it draws in things through side channels like that. That then just etch and etch. So back to Carolina Bays. Like, they're not impacts. We got that for certain. They're not caused by impacts. They're caused by these eddies for sure. Looks like there's an eddy that went here, which really means it's going this way, left to right, around generally the boundary with these other eddies. Left to right. Maybe having its boundary go above something and then down. I don't know. Down this way, up, down, up. Producing a spiral here. Let's look at this. Some kind of resistance. Current flowing, and then an eddy off the side. Current flowing, eddy off the side. Current flowing. This is reminding me of Carolina Bay right here. Flowing around and then down. Just an elongated one. Squished between one over here, one down here. So it's squished. Squished. Why would it be squished? Just pressures. And then it's under so much pressure that it's squished, but then there's a current flowing through that then is inducing eddies, but because they're squished eddies, they're elongated. That seems legit to me. Seems legit to me. Let's find some structure that it's running into. Maybe over here. This is probably a good spot. It's just running. It's coming up in here. And just running into resistances. Oh my god, these currents look intense. It's like it's going under and out. Or no, under, into, and then out of here? What in the... The currents here are kind of janky. They don't look like connected. This one's going down, this one's going up, but there's no like down for this to go into. It's like literally flowing into and underneath. Like what? And flowing out over here. Whoa. What are the currents like over by Sri Lanka? Cross, ramp up it, go around. So it's kind of like this. It ramps, it comes across, around, and ramps up this resistance. And then there's this eddy here. Eddy here. These are kind of like the way these eddies are forming by this larger current that's swirling, that's bringing a current generally across, like across this way, and then running into the Appalachians. But then it divides to go up this way and down this way, generally. But then it's like is more complex, where by going up this way, it holds a boundary against this current. Maybe it fills in the pressure so much that it starts to back current. Maybe it goes down this way, generally across here, out of the mouth of this snake head that's coming over across this way. I was thinking it went over here. Like from here down this way. Maybe there's another current that was going off of this line and in this way, but in instead of on the outside, where Baja, California, and all the other materials were accreting onto Laurentia. Instead of going out and along the boundary, it stayed atop the continent over on this side. Produced some kind of boundary from this current over here, like a lower jaw boundary, and then an upper jaw from this side going across this way. Which maybe reconverged somewhere like over around here and streamed out through Florida like that. Anything that was left, like the remnants of this interaction. Pardon me. No. Okay. Let's check out these bays a little more now. I can't believe I found that arrow. That arrow is pretty incredible. Maybe let's see if there's any over here that are more arrow-like. That's like at the edge, up down of the Appalachians, like right there, kind of thing, where any currents going just kind of held in will just get shoved more and more down this way. To a degree, where maybe that's influencing like here. Is that New Orleans? Mobile, Alabama. So that looks like it is. Like that's related. This channel. Being just fed from over here, pretty much. That then just made its way across the undercurrents, atop the surface currents, but undercurrents relative to the current coming across. That then, once it passed the lower currents that were going this way, and it went atop it, it then was able to edge back in over here as it approached the lower terrain and just picked up momentum and just started to carve. Even so much so that there's some of those salt deposits that are, I assume that's the same as this. Like this is probably this, but like the Mississippi produced all this, not just the Mississippi, but this huge width of water that was draining this way that then ran into this magma flow that just boiled the water enough to take out the salt and leave behind this bed of salt that's present here. And it's probably also present there, so that means that water definitely was coming across there pretty strong to do that through there. Possibly related also to this one though, so maybe it's a combo of those. Or just this one, I guess, feasibly, but this does look pretty relevant. Like, that looks like an arrow. With the teeth and everything. Just opened. Maybe a negative of an arrow. But showing how they can form, maybe? And then there's an eddy down here that seemed to form right here. With the yin-yang aspects. Okay. I don't know exactly what to say about them still. I just thought I'd record some more info. Some more thoughts. Like, for sure that they're in these channels with high prevalence here. It just indicates the water aspect of it all. And not just water, but like rules out other causes, because unless those causes can explain, basically be like, because of this impact, there's those rivers over there, like this river over here exists because of an impact. I've never heard that kind of reasoning. So unless someone can do that, they're pretty much conclusively not impact caused, I'd say. We can rule that out with definitiveness because of the proximity to these features that are not random. It's not a coincidence that they're in these locations. Okay, without further ado, I'll see you guys later. I still got another day. I might record tomorrow too. Probably some more today if I don't preoccupy myself with other things. Alright, peace.